On their return to the Premier League, Sunderland absolutely shocked West Ham with a 3-0 beatdown. In today's video, I'm going to react to a tactical analysis of it. First, let me just tell you, I did react to every goal from match week 1. You can check that out over on my Patreon. I made it on the cheapest tier possible for $1 US a month. Now, if you're an iPhone user, it's going to be a little bit more because Apple wants a cut. But I reacted to every goal from the Premier League this week, caught up with that. You can check that out over there on the cheapest tier if you're interested. But we're going to get into a reaction on how Sunderland, yes, Sunderland, returning to the Premier League. Hey, guys, I know, is this the year that the teams that promoted stay in the league and we relegate another team? Because I noticed that Leeds also won their match week 1. I think that's pretty exciting, seeing as last season, a couple seasons that I've watched, basically the teams that recently promoted, they try so hard, but they can never win. And match week 1, both teams, 2 of them won. All right, let's get into this.
After 3,042 days without a Premier League win, Sunderland returned to the English top flight in incredible...
All right, let's turn that volume up right there, because that will not do.
Style, as Reggie Labrie tactically dismantled Graham Potter's West Ham. This performance was complete, and it's a performance we've come to recognise from Sunderland over the last 12 months. But the question is, how did they get the job done?
What have they been doing?
Things about Saturday's game was that Enzo Lafie was dropped from the...
I've been sleeping on Sunderland for sure because I haven't been able to pay attention to the leagues underneath the top flight, but...
11, but when you actually watched the game and saw the midfield roles, it began to make a lot of sense. When playing out from the back, Sunderland came out in a 3-2 to give themselves a numerical advantage over the 3-man front line that was pressing them in, and it also meant that despite Lucas Paquetá trying to man-mark Granit Xhaka, Sunderland still had options centrally. However, that is probably the most boring point I've ever made in a YouTube video. Every team in the Premier League comes out in a 3-2, but the interesting part about this is that partner that Granit Xhaka had constantly changed. When the ball was on one side, Noah Siddiqui would be on the opposite side, coming deep to get around Granit Xhaka, and Habib Diarra, on the side that the ball was on, would bomb forward and get around the Sunderland winger. And then almost mirroring that, Noah Siddiqui would bomb forward when the ball was on his side, and Habib Diarra, on the alternate side of the ball, would come deep and support Granit Xhaka. Again though, it's not really interesting, is it? Them two coming deep isn't mental, it's not mind-blowing, but what is that their real role wasn't necessarily to be involved with the ball in the first phase. It was almost purely to disrupt West Ham's press. But despite Noah Siddiqui and Habib Diarra not being overly involved...
and anybody who has watched my channel for a long period of time, dating back to when I first started getting into tactics and playing a little bit of Football Manager, you guys know that I love an all-out press. And so it's interesting to see some tactics that are designed to disrupt a press. That's cool.
With the ball in the first phase, they were both absolutely sensational. Between the pair, the two midfielders covered a total of 24.6 kilometers. They were absolutely
Look
everywhere.
At that heat map.
I actually think that half the earth is covered by a 5'8" Congolese midfielder who plays for Sunderland. Noah Siddiqui was everywhere. On Saturday, Siddiqui made 3 interceptions, won 2 ground duels, made 2 ball recoveries, and wasn't dispossessed ever. Not even once. In terms of Premier League debuts, I don't think I've seen one quite as complete as Noah Siddiqui's against West Ham. He's just joined from Belgium, and he's just glided through a Premier League game like it was nothing. He was sensational. However, Siddiqui wasn't alone in a great midfield performance. Obviously, Granit Xhaka was like this metronome in the middle of the midfield, and then you had Habib Diarra, who was central to pretty much everything progressive and positive about this Sunderland performance. We already mentioned how Siddiqui and Diarra alternated on who was going forward and who was coming deep, and not only did it disrupt that West Ham press, but it also meant for some really, really nice advanced partnerships with the wide men. We see here, Diarra comes over and forms 2 separate triangles. One being a secure triangle to retain possession with Hume and Talby, but we all know that's not Sunderland. If you've watched them under Reggie Labrie, you know that when they get the ball going forward, they attack at a million miles an hour. So that's where we see the second triangle form with Talby and Mayenda. The ball then comes into Diarra's feet, he turns brilliantly and beats his defender before playing an unbelievable 1-2 with Eliza Mayenda, and Sunderland have gone from a relatively unthreatening area to having a really good chance on goal in a matter of literal seconds. But it wasn't all about getting Habib Diarra in these advanced positions in and around the penalty box. He actually wasn't there all that much. It was actually more about using him as an attacking trigger. The 21-year-old has become known for his creative and progressive capabilities, and on Saturday, Lebris looked to really take advantage of that. As soon as Habib Diarra gets onto the ball here, you see Trey Hume and Mayenda have their heads up and they're ready to bolt in behind because they know what the Senegalese midfielder wants to do in these positions. He wants to thread through balls, he wants to create things, he wants to make things happen.
Yeah, there were several of the goals that I witnessed in that match week video. My absolute favorite thing in football is a good through ball that nobody's expecting, and I think it was from this game, if I'm not mistaken. There was an absolute amazing through ball pass. I think it was this game that led to a goal.
And that's exactly what he did. Now, though, we've done a lot of positive talk about Sunderland going forward, especially in the first phase and the way they built out, and also going forward and building some really nice triangles through the midfielders. But they did have 37% possession, so they did a lot of defending, and they did a lot of good defending. I'm going to hold my hands up. I put these tweets out just before the game saying that Jared Bowen's curve runs through the inside of the Sunderland centre-backs could be dangerous. It could cause some problems. And as much as a yes, he did make the movements, Sunderland were well equipped to deal with it. Sunderland sat in a 4-2-3-1 mid-block in their rest defence.
It is so different from the football that I have had the pleasure of watching in the last couple of years because I got to watch Ange ball. And so, man, I'm not going to lie, after the absolute roller coaster of emotions of watching Ange ball, which, mad respect to Ange, man. He got us that Europa League. And I like the guy a lot. I really do, but it was like I was about to have a heart attack every time I watched Tottenham because they just could not defend. And then, magically, in that championship game, that trophy game, Ange said, hey, let's defend. Let's put a back line in. Let's actually not play that super crazy high press with just the few defenders back here who were easily exploited. And so, yeah, this is the kind of football that, man, I saw it work. Like my whole philosophy changed in just watching that Europa League final, just to kind of see how fun it can be to root for a team who plays low possession but just scores on counterattacks. It can be a lot of fun. I thought you guys were crazy when you told me that counterattacking football could be fun. I thought it was absolute nonsense, but
now, the natural goal for West Ham in this position will be to play it into the feet of a central player, probably Fulkrug in this area. They then want to play the ball back out wide in order to create space for Jared Bowen to then go through and get in behind. But, ladies and gentlemen, Reggie Lebris knew that was coming and he didn't like it. Sunderland's left centre-back is touch tight with Jared Bowen, and Granit Xhaka is following Fulkrug like a bad smell, which prevents...
I thought Fulkrug played for Borussia Dortmund. I didn't know that he was in the Premier League now.
That forward pass initially into the midfield area, and then also prevents Jared Bowen from being able to find any sort of space in that central area, which ultimately nullifies West Ham's attack, because without Jared Bowen's incredible movement and getting in behind, they really struggle to actually make much. Now, this is great. You've done really well. You've man-marked Jared Bowen out the game. He's struggled overall. He's not got a goal. He felt isolated throughout the game. But it is Jared Bowen we're talking about here, and he did still find some glimpses of ability to cause damage. And that's where Sunderland had to really stand up and show themselves for who they are. Here, we see that kind of inside, outside, back inside move that I mentioned earlier did form, and Bowen does incredibly well to just break what was a really robust Sunderland back line. And that means that West Ham can play through, and they get a shot off. And then Dan Ballard, the man who steps up in every big moment possible, makes an incredible block. And that is the real standout there, because if that goes in, the game flips, and Sunderland are chasing, and the game plan goes out the window. But Ballard wasn't going to let that happen. However, as we all know, it was not all about box defending, especially when you're playing a team like West Ham, who are not world beaters by any means, so that meant Sunderland did also have to be really strong in their pressing structure, and they were exactly that. Reggie Lebriss's team pressed this West Ham side in a 4-2-3-1, but they didn't just do it like that, they did it very smartly. They had the defenders being pressed from the blind side, and even the goalkeeper was being hunted down by Eliza Mayenda, and it forced them into, more often than not, having to play a long ball towards Reinildo and Granit Xhaka, who, you know, their monsters are experienced. They dealt with it so well. They pinned in on the West Ham player who received it. And then you had Noah Siddiqui, who covered everywhere. All this space here, that's Siddiqui's. He owns it. But playing this way does have its negatives. It did also put a lot of demand on the Sunderland backline being able to win things. And it also did leave some space at times for West Ham to potentially exploit the wide players. Because when Sunderland went forward, a lot of the team went forward. It often went to a back three with one of the fullbacks jumping on. So if West Ham were maybe a little bit more switched on, a little bit more capable, I think they could have possibly got some joy down the wing. But luckily, or maybe it was planned, Sunderland didn't end up getting exploited in that way, and this press worked absolutely phenomenally. Back onto the fun stuff now, though. We've got to talk about the first goal, the second goal, and the third goal, because they were picture perfect for what you'd expect from Sunderland's return to the Premier League. The first goal comes from that left-hand side.
The first goal was so intense. I remember reacting to it and just realizing that's the first goal for Sunderland in the Premier League in a very long time. And the crowd reaction, it was madness.
Alderete is in a relatively unthreatening position. If I was West Ham, I'm relatively happy with where Sunderland are with the ball. You don't see much threat coming from there, do you?
Right.
But this is where Sunderland's super spending in the summer, getting brilliant players in, players above the level of any other promoted side of the last few years, really does begin to shine through. Alderete plays a perfect cross straight into the head of playoff hero Eliza Mayenda.
Yeah, it was nuts.
Puts up a genuinely superb header. And yes, maybe Amanson should do better. Yes, the West Ham defender shouldn't be getting beaten like that. But I genuinely think there's not too much West Ham could have done here. It is just a superb cross, a superb header. It's just player quality, which I don't think you can say about many promoted sides over the last few years, having more player quality than some of these established teams. Which does also then lead to another important point, and I think it's about Sunderland's business. A lot of it's been saying, you know, these are young players, they're not going to do much, they're just like Burnley were under company, and Leeds have had a lot of credit for their physical signings, and yes, I've praised Leeds as well, but Sunderland's athleticism on show in this game was untrue. We're going to see it with the second goal as well, but the physicality in this squad, and the ability to not stop running, is what made them so difficult for West Ham to play against. We're going to look at the second goal now, and again, we're going to see the athleticism in this Sunderland squad, and to be honest, it's pretty much a carbon copy of the first goal, but this time, it comes from the freedom to roam that Lebris has given to his fullbacks, who were inverting, who were bombing down the wing, who were doing everything throughout this game. Reinildo burst forward through the middle using his freedom of movement that Lebris gifted to both him and Hume before finding Adingra, who has tons of space because Diarra is pushing the West Ham defender back by his position. He then plays another picture-perfect deep cross onto the head of yet another playoff hero, Mr. Dan Ballard. This is what I meant by picture-perfect goals for Sunderland's return. A lot of talk's been saying Sunderland are up even their full squad, it's all being changed. But you've got the boys who stepped up in the big moments last season, towards the end of that season, still popping up and scoring big goals, this time at the beginning of a Premier League season. That now leaves us with the nail in the coffin, the final goal. There's a lot of problems here from a West Ham perspective, but also a lot of things that I think we're going to see be a recurring pattern with Sunderland this season, and that is incredibly direct transition threat. Alderete rises to win the header, and as soon as he even looks at jumping up, Talby is on his toes, ready to leg it, which is what he does. He gets on his bike, he latches the ball.
This is the goal I was thinking about.
Holds it really well, but Wilson Isidore's ability to sprint through this pitch and make a perfect curve run to go out wide and receive the ball is just as important as Talby's
amazing
here. And then that leaves Isidore in one of his favourite positions. That's coming off the left, where he can go across goal like he loves to do. Now, the ball's pretty much gone through Humanson.
I love that goal.
The transition aspect and how quick
Sunderland
turned.
Exactly. That was a goal that I was talking about when I was reacting to the match week. The quick succession of of those events to get to the goal. It was so fast.
Bending a set piece into an attack is incredibly dangerous for a lot of teams in this Premier League. And I'm telling you, They're going to win games like this. Overall, this was a super...
What do you guys think about Sunderland? That is an absolutely, like, I was stunned when I was reacting. I did not expect that result. I didn't realize that both Leeds United and Sunderland won in their first week after being promoted. I think that's super cool. Something that we don't see enough of. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section underneath this video. I'll see you guys in the next one.